How's it going, everybody? Welcome to BA Reviews. Today I will be reviewing ISOM number 1. To start, make sure you don't take anything too seriously. The entire purpose of this really is to, I don't know, just give people some insight into my thoughts towards the story, the art, just ISOM in general, and hopefully it'll be a learning experience for some. I know it was for me. Being a new comic book creator, this definitely reinforced the idea of having a co-writer, for example, for my first comic issue, reinforced the incredible need for a very good editor or multiple editors, and to make sure that you get a line artist and colorist, inker that the best that you can afford, because that is your marketing material. That is what is going to attract people primarily to your campaign, unless you're famous and have a bunch of pre cultivated followers, essentially. So let's jump on into ISOM number 1. All right. So to start, the covers. So cover number 1 was actually quite good. I think this is what excited the, let's say, the traditional comic book readers. They saw this and likely assumed, like, hey, this comic might actually be pretty high quality. I believe this was done by Kane and White under a pseudonym. I think at the time, he didn't want to have his name necessarily attached because he was still connected to the mainstream or hoping to be part of the mainstream. But now, obviously, he's the art director there. But this is a bit of a Luke Cage homage. It does introduce the appearance, at least, of some of the characters, gives you an idea of what you can hopefully expect in regards to the quality of the art. And I mean, to me, it looks more of a 70s style setting. I think if he would have done that, this would have done a lot better, or he may have been able to have a more fitting story. But again, props for having Kanan do this cover. It does look quite good. But when you go to cover 2 and cover 3, you start to see the disparity um, between the art of Kanan White, and I believe 2 and 3 were done by Cliff Richards. This is where you get a preview to the art of the interiors. The characters are pretty lifeless. It's just kind of an awkward fight scene, and the scene doesn't really make much sense. It doesn't line up with the book because Isom and Yaira never fight in their suits in the book. You don't even see Yaira in her suit throughout the core of the book. There was no mass destruction in the city. I mean, it's hard to tell what's going on in the background there. It looks like they're on a bunch of rubble, maybe a pillar falling down, a random crane, but this I think is in line with the belief that there are a lot of 3D assets in this book. And I mean, again, if you look at just the facial structure of Yaira, it's not very detailed. It looks very bland. And then the third cover, again, it's in line with the second one. There's not a lot of detail in the characters. They look very static. They look like they could be 3D assets. I think it was proven that, especially the background was, it was 3D assets. Someone found the actual, the buildings and that entire background in SketchUp, the program that seemed to be used. It doesn't really, none of these covers excited me at all. All the character designs, the costumes or the suits were just very generic and bland. The colors looked a bit better on cover 1, but in general, the colors just seem very dull and bland. Nothing pops. And Alpha Core, I mean, it just seems like rehashing of and a blend of old Marvel and DC characters. So nothing unique, no wow factor in my opinion. But again, this is where having a following or a reach before you release a book can really go a long way. So now I'm going to go into my notes. So these are not like highly detailed or clean notes per se. It was just as I was reading the book, I just put some of my thoughts down in Word and, just I tried to read it within like an hour, hour and a half and just quickly put notes down. And then I'll do more of a summary towards the end. But this was just kind of my thoughts as I was going through the story. So the story starts out in Flores Park. We have no idea where that is. It would be good to know right off the bat since it is a fictional city. The initial pages do not give you any context. You have no idea there are people with abilities or who AlphaCore is, just a simple, like, she is back. Who's she? Like, why is she of any importance? The section to me is completely pointless. It tells you nothing other than the fact that crime is down. And to me, it just would make sense to just immediately introduce ISOM or have him in a scene that, again, introduces some stakes, some action, but that doesn't happen. So the book started 2 weeks ago, but then when you shift to ISOM, it's earlier. So it appears what's happening with ISOM is not present day, but you don't know if there is, a 2 week time period between the beginning and earlier. So that's a bit confusing. The initial page with ISOM is just to show his property and him punching a bag. Again, nothing to really excite the reader or pull them in. It doesn't provide any context. You could guess he's a rancher, I guess, at this point, but again, that's nothing that's going to be like get you really enthralled in the story right off the bat versus something like Watchmen, right? You immediately have a murder, you have intrigue, you have interesting character designs, beautiful art. There's a lot to pull you into the story immediately. And then they introduce Altona. Now, this scene is very frustrating from a reader's perspective, at least in my opinion, because immediately upon his sister asking for his help, he just says no. Like, if your sister or family member was to call you and say something's wrong, your response before they could even continue is, "Are you okay? Is everything all right?" Or, what, can I help you? His response is just no. Like, it's very weird to react to your own family in that manner, especially if someone, even her, could be in danger at this point because he doesn't know. He immediately shows that he doesn't care about Jasmine by saying what that got to do with me. Also, not very proper way of. It's not a very proper way to make that statement either. He's just rude and dismissive to his sister. It's very very awkward. It does not make you feel sympathy towards Isam. It does not make you feel attached to him in any way. And also, I'm just going to um, refer to him as Isam versus jumping back and forth between Isam and Avery. And then here, again, just how he talked to her. What the Altona, I'm not your errand boy. Call the law if you think she's missing. Like, if it's a family friend, how could you not give a shit? Especially if you have powers. Now, we don't know if he has powers at this point, but if you were to continue the story and find out he has powers, naturally you kind of think back to the beginning of the story and be like, why the hell did he react that way? Why wouldn't he be interested or worried about this girl? Now, to me, if you wanted to have this scene be impactful, you have to introduce some high stakes, right? You could do that by Altona saying, "Oh my God, we have Jasmine on camera walking past Projexis. Her face was battered, it was bloody, and then she just ran away. I think something horrible has happened to her." Or, we have evidence or we've heard that she's been raped. Something that should pull Isam into the situation like, oh my God, I have to do something. And when Altona's like, I think it's Darren, that should trigger his anger, like, oh, that son of a bitch, I have to do something, or because he has all this anger towards Darren. Better yet, switch Jasmine and Altona around. Have Jasmine be the one that gives him the call. So at first he's just like, what does this girl want? And then like, oh my God, your sister's been hurt. We saw her running away from the building. She looked beaten up. Then ISOM would immediately be like, oh my God, you know, I'll be right there. Show me the camera footage. Or I gotta go beat Darren's ass. Just something to engage the reader, pull them in and get them excited. It's not too much to ask for. So that scene really it didn't evoke any emotion, and it did not get me pulled into the story. But finally, after essentially being begged, he decides to finally, I guess, do the right thing because of a random lady, Mrs. Newman, who goes to his church, not for his own sister. Now we're getting more introduced to more art. One of my complaints here is that Isam's musculature is constantly changing. He goes from looking huge to then skinny and back and forth. Here's a good example. Here he clearly looks quite jacked, right? He's got big defined traps, shoulders, even his neck is defined. And then you go to the next panel and he looks tiny, right? His chest is not pronounced, his shoulders do not really stick out, his traps just disappeared. So it's just very inconsistent throughout the book. Now that he's decided to go back into the city, he talks about how he didn't want to return. But again, there's no context provided. They don't give you, a snapshot into the past, a scene just to give you something. Again, similar to what they did throughout Watchmen, just so that you could get an idea of what the comedian had done in the past and, what led up to his murder. It's just very vague. And he just decides to go and take a shower. You have this very weird naked silhouette panel, which was like kind of, to me, kind of copying what happened in Batman vs Superman with Ben Affleck, but to me, completely unnecessary for a comic. You're better off at the start of the book just having him like shirtless and just really jacked and defined with some great art, similar to what Corey did for my character in my book, to like kind of impress the readers. Like, oh wow, I like how this guy reminds me of some Image characters or 90s, superheroes. He continues on saying, I continued to build so I'd have no reason to return. To me, this doesn't make much sense. What is he referring to? What is he building? Is he talking about building up his ranch, building up his finances, building up his physique? So that was a bit confusing and kind of irrelevant again to, the reason he's returning is to do the right thing and help a woman. And so, yeah. And this is something you're going to hear me complain a lot about throughout these notes. There are multiple panels where the face is the face of Isom or other characters is facing the reader, but you can't see the eyes. They're all like hidden in shadows or whatnot. And to me, you need to use the eyes to show the emotion of the character, what they're feeling. That eyes show expression, and there's a lot of missed opportunities there. Then there's an entire page just stating the obvious, the fact that he's returning to the city, which was already clearly alluded to, plus another shot of him with no visible eyes and the door with no handle, likely 3D assets. And then suddenly, there's another new location, and it's vaguely referred to as somewhere you would not want to be. Possibly the present, possibly the past. We have no idea. It's extremely vague. It would be very good to just specify the location. Is it Florist Park? Like, where is it? It appears that civilians are being attacked by Yaira. Makes you think that she is a villain and a bitch who possibly just finished a Pilates class but seems to be wearing dress shoes. Then Alpha Core is introduced. You have Green Apple, Pull and Peel Licorice. You have Helmet Head and Jawman, as I like to call them. Again, just bland character designs, nothing to wow you or make you, at least for me, make you interested in learning more about the characters. The fight ends and they are finally introduced by name, but you're not sure why they are talking downward toward Yaira. If she just blasted Pull and Peel Licorice toward the ground and Solari caught her. So may have been a mistake, but very confusing how they had those panels laid out and the perspective of them. So to me, that sudden introduction of Yaira and Alpha Core just completely pulls you away from ISOM and the story arc that was starting to be built. Just very, very distracting. Uh, again, did not build any intrigue for me. Just pulls you away from ISOM. And it was already hard enough to have sympathy or to care about ISOM at this point. And then, you go into this whole other scene somewhere else and you essentially forget about him. And you could, again, at that point, be like, oh, this is the she that is back that they mentioned at the beginning. But again, you don't have any context about her. So then it goes back to ISOM. So flopping back. I thought the introduction and the first interaction between like ISOM and Darren was pretty good. It showed that Darren was cocky, arrogant, right, greedy, all of those kinds of things. I thought that was pretty interesting. I do think his character design is pretty good. It's just that the art it didn't do enough for him. It was much better, obviously, in Kanan White's cover one. And then they just use a ton of page space just to do the transition from being outside to going to Darren's office. There's very little dialogue that occurs, and there's very little context that is given, which explains why it's such a long book because there's just a lot of real estate throughout the pages that's being used up for little action or little context. And then you had a spot here where the tables, even with strange light sources, it's very weird that the tabletops and the backs of the chairs are black here, and then within a panel switch, the tabletops are gray. So just inconsistent. I mean, these just look very, very generic. There's just no detail in most of the backgrounds, or pretty much all the backgrounds throughout the book. And then there's 4 more panels where his eyes are not visible. So here's a great example from the very beginning of the book where there's this just random art piece of Isom, I guess, punching 4 guards at once. And you can't see anybody's eyes. Like, yeah, you can see his face, like he's kind of like stressing out. Um, or maybe pushing out a fart, but like show his eyes to show like he's pissed off or he's exhilarated, something. I just don't understand why there are no eyes in so many different panels of this book. This was pretty funny. There's a lot of kind of magician tricks throughout this book where things disappear or randomly change locations. So here you see Darren has a bracelet on his right hand, and then suddenly it's on his left hand, and even the cigar changes. I don't think you would have swapped the cigar and lighter and bracelet. This is something where I just don't understand how an editor didn't catch, or even Eric. Anytime I received art back from my artist, I went through it and analyzed every portion of it. I would zoom in, right, and just check out the detail everywhere. And if something wasn't to my liking or I wanted it tweaked, I would simply just go back and be like, hey, can you change this? And they had no problem doing it. But I just don't know how Eric missed this, but also his editors and the artists themselves. And then again, in this scene, where the security guards are getting introduced, Isom suddenly looks tiny again. His eyes are not visible. He's face to face with an intimidating man. The artist should have used facial expressions and emotion via his eyes, again, to show fear, to show anger, angst, something, but doesn't do that. It, to me, is very clear that Isom punches first, completely unprovoked. There's absolutely no reason for him to just start beating up these security guards. As far as we know, they're not doing anything illegal. They may not even know what Darren is up to. Why would you beat them up? It just doesn't make any sense. And then you had this weird word bubble where he says, "Who the hell were you talking to like that?" Which I think he's missing a word there. Who the hell were you talking to? Probably me like that. So just another, kind of error there. And it's obvious who he's talking to. Why not say, "Who do you think you are to talk to me like that, you prick bastard," or something, make it intense, add an exclamation point. You know, again, it's some emotion. Pull the reader in. And then Isom clearly kills the security guard. Blood would not project from a midsection without causing a crazy skin-busting wound. He's dead. DED, just dead. And it's weird how they kind of show the rib cage through the suit there. And like, is that the floor behind the guy's head? Like, did he punch him so hard he kind of flipped upside down? It's very, it's a strange shot, but that guy's definitely dead. And then you have this panel here where it makes it seem like he's punching in a backward motion, hitting a guy who's already flat on the floor while Isom is standing tall, like he is already punching him, somehow reaching the floor like Stretch Armstrong or something. Again, it's just some of the art just is confusing. And then all of a sudden, Isom decides to announce or say, "If you guys don't want this to continue, you better pull out your pistols," or something along those lines. Like, why would you give them advice on how to stop you? You wouldn't say anything at all. Like, if anything, you'd be saying threatening things to try to scare them, because you should want them to run away so that you don't continue to beat up innocent security guards. I mean, or you just want to neutralize them. So to me, that was just a horrible line. And then you have a panel where Isom seems to do kind of a weird jump move while pushing the security guard's face downward, blasting his head into the floor while saying, "But you're going to answer my question honestly." I'm pretty sure that guy is going to be knocked unconscious. I mean, clearly, well, we don't know yet, but Isom is an accept. He has extra strength. This likely could have killed the guy. He's probably bleeding out from the back of his head. I don't think he'll be very coherent. And then you have a comment from Darren. Sorry, I need coffee to survive ISOM. I needed a lot of coffee just to read that book. So Darren says, "Tonight is the moneymaker, and it'll take forever to get your blood off the floor. I don't know where you learned how to do all of that, but my elite is going to drag you up out of here." So it seems this is happening in his office or office space, which would not be out in the actual club itself. So the blood would have no impact on the night's event. And then, if ISOM was the hero or a hero in Flores Park in the past, he doesn't wear a mask. You would think Darren would know that he is a accept. So that's confusing if you isolate this to ISOM 1. And then the sudden appearance of the elite. I mean, if the elite is his right-hand man, wouldn't you have him there the entire time? Why would you just suddenly bring him out? And why would you wait until all of your security guards have been beaten to a bloody pulp? Like, it's convenient. Let's see. So, again, he punches the elite with his eyes closed. Then the elite does this weird body slam move, but his head seems to disappear from the art. And it's just very strange looking to me, as you can see here. In many of the panels, the elite or Santuan, at this point, again, he's just considered the elite. He looks twice the size of ISOM. So you would think his head would kind of pop out here or somewhere here, but it's like he's just headless here. And ISOM looks so skinny and tiny compared to him. So again, just kind of strange art scenes here. And then ISOM suddenly lands an impossible looking straight-legged kick that just looking at it made my sciatica flare up. Like that looks painful. Uh, Essentially, ISOM gets, in my opinion, he deservedly gets his ass kicked for instigating an entire fight with security guards that were just doing their job, and there's no evidence that they're involved in any illegal activities or were aware of any. And then you have the insanely coincidental Yaira collision, which doesn't make much sense because from the previous scene where they show her in Alpha Core, it seems she had won the fight. So why is she suddenly getting thrown backwards through the airspace? And you have unlimited airspace, but somehow their backs collide with one another. Like there could have been such more, like they could have introduced Yaira and had their initial interaction be so much more intriguing and interesting, but they just had this coincidental bumping in of one another. Uh, After they collide, Yaira begins to stand while displaying a killer beard that I am just totally jealous of. I mean, look at this 5 o'clock shadow. Like, she looks like a beast. And then you just see, again, very just undetailed backgrounds, just blobs of background characters, blotchy buildings. Like, it looks like the windows are being blasted out. But I don't think anything of that nature is going on. It's just very, very, very low detail. Then she makes a statement, what do you all want? No amount of super police could stop me unless I wanted you to. She doesn't have any evidence that he is super police. He's obviously not dressed up like Alpha Core. And why would you ever say that you might want the police to stop you? So just a strange statement, in my opinion. There's a lot of strange statements in the book that, to me, a co-writer or a good editor would have been able to provide some substitutions, essentially. And then again, just horrible background art. I mean, just blotchy chunks of black ink. Like the windows have just disappeared. There's just random like shading everywhere. And then just to have her look. I mean, if you were to, I mean, even if you don't zoom in here, just her face looks masculine. Like you can't even really tell that's a feminine face. It's a missed opportunity to have a great art shot of her to get fans or readers interested in her or impressed by her. Then he gets, put into the hospital. Alpha Core just decides to take him to the hospital. They don't question the fact that he was just, thrown into a car or whatnot. And, you would think like, oh, if he's alive, maybe he's an accept, but they just drop him off. And then he leaves the hospital and then pings Altona. There's just a lot of there's several panels again where the background is just extremely undetailed, just very blotchy looking. It's very distracting, and just too many panels and pages just to show him going from the hospital to Altona. And then you have the dialogue between Altona and Isom, and it's just not endearing. It does not bring any emotion out of me. It didn't make me feel like they loved one another. It just felt very cold. And then you had this statement, where, he says, don't tell mama about this. It's like you guys are grown adults, not kids. It's like you were a hero, or you were a hero, or whatever. Like, why are you asking your sister not to tell your mom? And then shortly thereafter, she says, if you don't update me every other hour, I will tell moms. So again, a miss by the entire team on that typo. But again, it's just weird to keep mentioning mom like that, unless she's like the queen of accepts or something. It's just strange. And then you have this internal thought of, truth to be told, saving Jasmine wasn't my primary focus. I almost forgot about it. This admission to me is really bad. If you're trying to frame Isam as a hero or a potential hero, this is not heroic at all, and it proves that he is more focused on revenge for getting disrespected. It becomes more clear when he mentions being talked to and that such an occurrence could not go unaddressed. It's really, really hard to relate to Isam, to feel sympathy for him. Like he just comes across like an asshole at this point, even towards his sister. It's very strange. Lack of background detail continues to be a distraction. Once he's on the farm, the initial dialogue is kind of pointless, and again, it just pulls you away from the Isam story about learning about him. It's just this random insert about the ranch and his ranch hands. He states that the ranch comes first, which again, very strange considering Jasmine's life should be a priority, right? We still don't know. She could be in harm's way. We have no idea what's happening to her, but his focus is on the ranch first. Pretty sure his ranch hands could handle it if he's a good businessman and leader. He then clarifies that he is not a vigilante, so again, makes you think he is not a hero. One of the side characters tries to toss up a joke, and Isam, for like the second or third time, appears to just be immune to laughing or having a personality. And then here he admits, in some more internal thoughts, I'm acting fake concerned. I really just want to punch him in his mouth. It just reminds you of just like high school, just like, you know, I don't know. Like Isam has been bullied verbally, and I just want to punch him in the face. Like it just seems very immature, this way of thinking. Again, it should be like, oh my God, he hurt Jasmine. She's been raped or something. I'm gonna kill him. Just something powerful again to make the reader be like, yeah, he's a good guy. He's a hero. I want him to beat him up. But really, you're like, I don't really care if he punches Darren in the face. I mean, Darren has really, I have more sympathy towards Darren at this point. There's no proof that Darren's done anything wrong. Yeah, so to me, this is just him admitting he never cared about Jasmine. And again, he has no evidence that she is safe. And he's just fully focused on personal revenge. So, very, very poor motivation for a character in general or someone that you're trying to build up or rebuild as a hero. So, to me, it just seems like there's no stakes at play. Then you're on to a random scene in the club to show a guy with glowing eyes that seems to be a potential opponent or competitor of Darren's. And then he makes this statement, which again, there's a missing word in there, I believe. He says, pretending. The pulse of the pulse of town is maintained between these walls on this night. Guessing he meant to say the pulse of the town. So again, that there's just several kind of easy things that could have been caught. Then you flip back to ISOM. So again, that's just a character to me. That's just a toss in. It just pulls you away from the story of ISOM. It doesn't really give you any context. Like, okay, this guy might have some powers. He doesn't like Darren, potentially. But again, you keep getting disengaged from ISOM, from the main character, and the initial plot point, which is Jasmine. So back to ISOM. Again, he talks about his pride. He says, internal thoughts, my sense of pride is just about the only thing carrying me through. So his pride is his motivation at this point. There seems to be no violent threat towards him. There are no lives at stake, potentially, but there's no evidence of it. And he doesn't seem to be worried about Jasmine. There's no imminent doom. Like, oh my God, Darren could be hurting kids. He could be pushing drugs on the street. He could be doing this. He could be doing that. He killed an innocent woman. There's so many things that you could do to really depict Darren as an evil bastard. But all he seems like is a corrupt and greedy businessman. Uh, there's just too many panels and pointless dialogue just to show him approaching the club. Instead of trying to sneak into the club or do something intriguing, he's just going to walk up to it. Again, another coincidence. He just randomly sees Jasmine. He runs up to her, puts his hand on her shoulder. She hints at feeling guilty about her mom, worrying, but nothing else. Some hints or info here would have been nice. It really would have helped pull you into the story and either worry about Jasmine or make Isom worry about Jasmine, which he should be. But this, of course, doesn't happen. This time, the security guard does kind of instigate in a way with Isom, but it would be fair to say, from their perspective, they just see a guy in a hoodie with his hand on a girl who looks stressed out. They are probably assuming that he is harassing her. And you get the sense that Jasmine might work at the club. So, in a sense, they're just trying to protect a coworker. So you can't blame them for approaching the way they did. And Isom could have ran after Jasmine, could have just walked with her, like, hey, let's just go. Oh, everything's fine, but no. He's more focused on Darren at this point. Just lets her leave. And then here, there's another magic trick where this earring in the gentleman's right ear suddenly disappears and possibly gains a mustache. I'm pretty sure that's the same dude. Uh, but yeah, earring just disappears, but a mustache appears. And then Isom says, hands off the merch. Well, we know Eric loves his merch. Security guard suddenly becomes a few feet taller, and Isom becomes skinny looking again. After beating up the first batch of guards, he beats up a second batch despite the fact that, again, he has no idea if they've done anything wrong, anything illegal. So just beating up seemingly innocent security guards. And then here, Isom apparently punches this guy and he just stumbles sideways into the stairs. You have no idea where he punched him. Again, the detail on this side character is just really lacking. Isom looks tiny again. And then magically, he's up on the top of the stairs. He's got him by his collar. And this 3D asset, or these stairs, they have no side railing, no structure at all to the side. Like they could just like poof, just fall over. It just seems very dangerous. I think the Florist Park government would, I think that would be violating some codes. And then he says to the security guard, because he won't tell him what he wants to know or whatever, then everything that's about to happen is on you. No, actually, it's on Isom. He instigated all of this. uh, that security guard might have no idea what he's talking about. Just could be an innocent guy, innocent contractor. This is why we need context. always. After throwing him through double doors and into the club, which could have hurt civilians, right? One of those doors could have knocked somebody out cold. That bouncer could have knocked somebody out. There's women, in that section of the club, so very careless. And then he directs his anger at the women of the club. Instead of just telling everyone, leave, like be intimidating, tell them to get out of there. I'm pretty sure the women would just flee because they just saw him throw a guy through double doors, and people seem to know that accepts exist. I mean, why would a woman just jump into a fight or anything? So it seems like his ego is a bit bruised from Yaira still here. And then, for some reason, Abraham Lincoln is clubbing it up. I don't know if this is an Easter egg for future books. Maybe Abraham Lincoln, is resurrected, fights Accepts or isn't Accept. I don't know, but that's really funny that Abe Lincoln is at the club. And then the elite shows up again. Essentially, ISOM says, let's take it outside. And then there's just a lot of extended dialogue between elite and ISOM. You would think it would go right to action, right? ISOM got his ass kicked by this guy. He wants his revenge. He again admits here that he is no one's hero. It's as if he's ashamed of his past. And this again would be good where they could have give you a glimpse into his past so you could feel sympathetic towards him, try to understand why he's acting like this, but you have no idea. It's extremely vague. But yeah, he goes from being extremely cocky one minute to being very vague. He again admits he cannot tolerate disrespect. So this is where it just seems like there's a bit of a self-insert throughout the story, and it's essentially the theme of the entire story. That's what's at stake. Respect, being respected, and the loss of that. He reinforces again that he is not a hero, stating to not credit the events to heroism, but to credit him. Yikes. All right, so again, you cannot see the eyes of the characters involved. A third of a page with a close-up of the elite of San Juan, and you just see primarily a shadow of his face. Like, this is where they should have taken the face from cover one, right? With the gnarly looking teeth. They could have had his eyes look crazy, had him look evil. Instead, you just get a guy in the shadows. So a missed opportunity, in my opinion. The elite then carries on with dialogue, just talking about the term accept and how it's used by people to identify. It's just kind of a strange line, especially in the current political kind of landscape to talk about like, oh, well, this is how we identify ourselves, or they use this term. It's just kind of strange to me. It's just weird to have that conversation when you're, face to face with a guy that just beat your ass. Um, and then he's carrying on this dialogue while he's throwing a punch. That dialogue, those word bubbles should have happened before, and then you should have had the art just focus solely on how impactful and intense this strike is. So the fight scene could have been worse, but it didn't feel very intense. The perspectives were a bit confusing from panel to panel, and the I don't know, the action just it didn't connect very well. But you at least had an idea of, you know, I guess what was happening overall. Essentially, he defeats Santuan, but it feels pointless since he didn't achieve anything in regard to Darren. The only thing that you could get out of this, which again, you'd have to really be thinking hard, is that, oh, when he bumped into Yaira, maybe he absorbed some of her power, and so now he's able to dodge a punch, jump off a wall, and knock out Santuan. But he doesn't, again, he doesn't achieve anything. He doesn't actually go into the club. I mean, if he's got this extra power, he could have just ran into the club, barged through all the security guards, grabs Darren by the throat, ran out, or whatever, something. Instead, he gets approached by the police. They seem to take Santuan's side, and ISOM just runs away. So that's your big, big moment. And he's just runs away. Then again, just like when he ran away from the hospital, there's a lot of panels and page real estate dedicated to him just running away from the cops. Nothing very exciting or interesting. No art to really wow you. Yeah. He goes to his sister's place. Now she decides to warn him about Darren's reach and power. She probably should have done that early in the story. So I think that was a misplaced kind of statement there. There's more vagueness about where she works. You know nothing about Projexis, why it's important, what she does. Again, no context. The sequence with his niece, in my opinion, was the best part of the story. This is the only part of the book where you see him act more human, as if he has a heart. It is a nice exchange, and it would have been good to see that with his exchange with Jasmine, with his own sister. Then you could overlook, more of his reactions, towards Darren, towards the security guards. But it's almost too late for this to happen, to be quite honest. Then there's a lot of dialogue and panels about Jasmine, only to determine that she is scared and or angry, which isn't a shocker. It's kind of given already based on what we've seen. And then Isom, again, reiterates, like, don't know, and right now I don't care. So he's referring to what's going on with Jasmine. So he has that nice exchange with his niece, acts loving and caring, and then goes right to, I don't give a shit about this girl. Like, just that. It's crazy. And then we switch back to Darren, where there's a hefty chunk of dialogue from Darren just to solidify the fact that he is greedy and power hungry, which is already apparent. He's a club owner. He's cocky, arrogant. It was quite obvious, in my opinion. And then you have the awkward big man and a little glass shot, drinking with his eyes closed. Just pointless again. Why do you need to have a panel of him drinking a glass of water, and how, you know, based on the previous art, he doesn't seem like a massive guy or anything. There's no reason to have him drinking out of that glass. So maybe they couldn't find the right 3D asset for the glass. But yeah, it doesn't look very good. And then there's more magic here. I really think maybe Darren's an accept. He can just magically move things, make things disappear. You look at these two panels here. He has up here, he has a ring on his ring finger and pinky finger of his right hand, and then suddenly the ring on his ring finger disappears. And it gets better. And then he starts talking about his empire, which honestly it reminds me of how Eric talks about his own company. So it's kind of ironic. And then the big magic trick. Both rings disappear, and with the use of just a couple fingers, he crushes the tiny glass. Maybe he stole it from a kid. I don't know. It's a very strange glass. I should have brought like a tiny glass. That would have been kind of funny. So yeah, both rings disappear. And then you have this awkward panel here where it seems like his middle finger could be grazing the trigger as well as her trigger finger, and then, the inside of her hand there is like right at the end of the gun. There was just no point for her to be touching the gun, based on what was going on in that page. Like he pulls this gun out of the drawer, and then she just decides to like stroke the gun or something, and then he just like they just show him like holding the gun downward. It's again just some pointless art shots that could have been utilized to tell more context, to tell more story. And then finally you get to the part of the book where he goes to see his suit maker. There's just a ton of, again, panels and page real estate just to show that he's got some unique clientele and that he's protected. Like you get a little bit more insight into the fact that there's a lot of accepts out in the world, but that shouldn't be a surprise since you have already seen, let's see, what, a total of six, 3 Alpha Core, Yaira, ISOM, and then Santuan. So all in one, you know, small area apparently. And then you get introduced to the magical and unique and powerful material of rub-on-on. Yes, rub-on-on. Sounds like a lotion or something. It's very in line with the names of his characters that he has introduced so far. They're just either corny, generic, or just laughable, right? You have Horseman, which people could read it as Horseman, Rabanan, Dokuman. I mean, there's just Gooding, Yaira. I mean, Isam. I mean, just the title Isam does not excite you. It doesn't make you interested at all. It doesn't make, like, is it initials? Like it just not very interesting at all. And all of that lines up again with the character designs, the suit designs. It's just all very kind of meh and bland to me. And then his suit fits. That's it. No clues toward his plan or motivation beyond revenge on Darren. You have no hint at any imminent doom on the city. Are these accepts a threat? Has there been mass destruction due to them? It's just like, oh, you have Alpha Core and you have these random accepts, but I mean, are they even harming anyone? Is there anything big going on? We have no idea. All we know is Isam's pissed off and he wants revenge on Darren. And yeah, the suit, again, very bland, very uninspired. In that big shot at the end there, the suit and his musculature have no detail. It's nothing to wow you at all. Then suddenly, you're somewhere near Florida. Really? Like Georgia? Alabama? Again, why so vague? It makes no sense at all. Present day, past, earlier 2 weeks ago, we have no idea. Future. Several pointless panels just to show Norfolka playing a show and to allude to them not being human or being accepts. So again, more tossing characters. There was just so many pages and art real estate that could have been used to really focus on ISOM, to make it a more exciting story. But it's just, you're getting bounced around to all these different characters, different locations, different time periods. It's just very distracting, in my opinion. It's too much in an initial chapter or issue or whatever. The story should stand on its own, should be self-contained to an extent. You could have some Easter eggs, some hints, some things to make the reader excited about the future, but that doesn't happen. That's ISOM in a nutshell. It was a slog to get through, especially the second time. for this review. I mean, I could have made so many notes and comments about art, word bubbles, dialogue. I mean, just there's just so many things that you read and looked at, and you're just like, huh? But you just needed to get through it. There's so many pages, and it was over 90 pages. You could achieve so much in that. I mean, look at Watchmen. I mean, just in like the first 70 pages, I mean, immediately you have a murder. So there's intrigue and there's mystery. You have the introduction of Rorschach. You have a great character design. It's very mysterious and just very badass looking. You have all the internal thoughts of Rorschach that really connect you to the character. Makes him seem, very just interesting in general. And then they do a good job, again, introducing other characters, but making sure that everything melds together. You know that all these characters are connected. You know why. You get glimpses into their past. They do a good job of showing you what the comedian had done in the past so that you understood why he was the way he was. And then it shows you what happened right before he got murdered. It makes you really interested in, what is he talking about? Who's doing what? Like, man, to have the comedian think that something just horrible is going on really pulls you in as a reader and just makes you just excited to just keep reading and to see what happens next. And then you have such unique character designs, again, like Rorschach, especially, Mr. Manhattan. I mean, it's just so much happens in just the first 80 pages, but very, very little happens in the first installment of ISOM. I mean, you can feel connected to, uh, you know, especially Rorschach and other characters just in the introduction of Watchmen, but you don't really feel connected to anybody. At least I didn't. I mean, maybe if you're an asshole, you could feel connected to ISOM, just, but again, it was a very good learning experience to read the story. It reinforced, my belief that I need to have a co-writer, someone with a ton of experience when I do my first issue versus just assuming that I'm a good enough comic book writer when I've never written a real comic, right? I've written prose, which is much different. And to translate a story from prose into a comic is not cut and dry. So if I want to make the most out of the money that I'm going to invest into this comic, and if my readers are going to get the most out of this story and the art, I need to go all out, right? I need to have a co-writer. I need to have great editors. I need to find the best line artist, inker, colorist that I can afford so that the readers don't walk away the same way that I did with ISOM. I want them to walk away like, wow, whew, that was a powerful story. That art was awesome. I want to go through it, see if I missed anything. I cannot wait for the next issue. I don't want them excited about the next issue just because of my name or what I say or my videos, really. I want them to be completely enthralled by my story. I want them invested because of the story, because of the characters, because of the art. And I mean, the writing in general, but not me as the writer, I guess, if that makes sense. So, yeah, I think people should read this. I think you can learn from the art, you can learn from the storytelling, and it could help you become a better writer, prepare your first book, next book, you know. But you need to read several books, obviously. And then you can also, again, read, another book that's really well known or any indie book, several indie books, right? And mainstream books, and see what the disparity is between the story, between the characters, between the art. That way you know what you want for your book. So appreciate everybody watching. Um, I tried to make it a pretty even keel review. Try not to be very hyperbolic and all of that, but some of the stuff did make me laugh and want to be very sarcastic because it's just like, how did some of this stuff get missed? How after reading so many monumental comics throughout the year, books like Daredevil, Punisher, Watchmen, all the Superman. I mean, how is this universe, these characters, these names, the story, like the best that you could come up with, especially with a lot of resources and connections. So it just was, um, yeah, it made you think a lot, essentially. So, yeah. And please, I would love everybody to go to Indiegogo.com and check out Vigilantes Creed. That is my active campaign. You will see the link down in the description. And I have two novels and a mini comic. It is about a gargoyle and a team of vigilantes fighting terror in Detroit. And the mini comic is 15 pages of exquisite art that introduces all the major and supporting characters so that you know exactly how these characters, the colors, the backgrounds, everything should look while you're reading the prose so that you can focus on the action, focus on the context of the story, and not be distracted by trying to reimagine or put the pieces together of how everything looks. It's meant to be an extremely immersive reading experience. My stories are very emotional, highly detailed. I want my readers to feel something when they read my story. I want them to feel like they've been punched in the chest throughout some of the, just highly emotional parts. I want to tug at your heartstrings, but I also want the story to inspire you. I mean, this book helped me through so many dark, times in my life, and as I was writing it, and as the story helped me deal with life and it inspired me, I'm like, man, it'd be just so amazing if I could inspire others with this story. If this story could help others through their darkest moment or moments. And so that's one of my motivators. If it can even help just one person, it's fantastic if it can at least entertain folks. But if it can make them feel something, um, make them think deeply about life, um, mission accomplished. The rest is a bonus. So I want everyone to read my book. I want people to critique my book. I want to learn. I want to make my universe the best it can be. So please go to Indiegogo.com, pick up two novels and a mini comic. All orders ship out within 2 days. Typically, next day, I have full stock of everything, and you'll get a ton of free art prints, free trading card, free bookmarks, and these novels are oversized. They are the size of comics, so I can do larger fonts and I can really take advantage of the real estate of the cover cardstock so that you can really appreciate the great art that my artist did. So, yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate you being here, and God bless.